the book of Proverbs. And do you guys feel wiser? Yeah, anybody know? Come on. Some encouragement this morning. Do you feel wiser? You're 5 weeks into studying wisdom. You should know, Brian, you're honest to a fault. Let's do it again today. This is why we keep looking. The fundamental premise of the book of Proverbs, as we saw a few weeks ago, is that wisdom is more than knowledge. It's not just knowledge. It's knowledge that's applied at the right time in the right way. And it's much more than just being good and moral. It's much more than moral rectitude. It's morality being played out in the right way in the right time. Because oftentimes in our lives, the moral code, the morality of life of the Bible doesn't exactly apply. See, for example, if you have a friend or if you have somebody, an enemy or somebody you don't like, somebody at work, somebody at school, and they wrong you, or they're doing something wrong in their life, you ask the question, should I tell them? And you have a couple choices. You can go and tell them, or you can wait and tell them later, or you can just not tell them at all, and you can say, it's probably wiser for me to keep it inside. And all three of those choices are morally okay, depending upon the circumstances you find yourself in. And that's why wisdom is so nuanced, and that's why biblical wisdom says this. It's not a set of rules, the book of Proverbs. Rather, wisdom is a relationship. And it comes through having a relationship with God where you are constantly feeding off of him, constantly listening to his voice and what he has to say about you, or your life and the decisions that you make. It's very easy to open the book of Proverbs, point to one of them and say, aha. But that's to totally misuse the book of Proverbs. Rather, Proverbs says, listen, get into a relationship through the gospel with the one who created you, and you'll hear his voice, and then you'll know. And also, fundamentally, the reason why I read Proverbs 12:1, which, by the way, on the inside of your bulletin are all the Proverbs that we've just read, so you can reference them. I know it's sort of a grab bag of Proverbs. Proverbs 12:1 basically says this: if you and I are not willing to accept criticism, and if you and I are not willing to get reproof, it says, where people can come into our lives and say, this is where you need to fix something. If we're not, it says, you're stupid. It says that's the opposite of wisdom. The cornerstone of wisdom is humility. It's the ability to say, I don't know everything. And so what I'm going to do is go back to God and go back to the cross and go back to the gospel and do probably the most countercultural thing in this decision that I'm making. And today, there's no coincidence that we're talking about the topic of our relationships. Because over the last few weeks, we looked at anger. Then last week we looked at our words and what words we use. And I'm sort of doing a series within a series because anger and our words and our relationships, it all ties together. To say the book of Proverbs wants to give us a guide on how you and I have relationships with people and how, most importantly, you and I fix those relationships. Because we'll see, the book of Proverbs assumes that being human by nature, we are going to live in broken relationships. There are going to be times when people piss you off. There are going to be times when people anger you. There's going to be times when people wrong you. There's going to be times when people hurt you and offend you. And the book of Proverbs assumes it, and then it gives us a way to fix it. But first, I'm going to say something here, and I know you're going to be like, oh, awesome, Pastor, wonderful insight this morning. But let me say it. It bears saying, and I'll illustrate it a little bit. First, what we see throughout the Bible is that you and I fundamentally need relationships. We need them. We're wired for them. Why? Well, one reason is because we are built in the image of God, and he himself is a God of relationship. He's a God who has a relationship throughout all of eternity with his Son and the Holy Spirit. And because you and I are built in his image, we're wired to have relationships, to want to need them. And I know as I said that, you're going to be like, great, wonderful insight. We need relationships. This is what I woke up on a cold Sunday morning for. But here, there's a prevailing sentiment that a lot of people will tell you about relationships, saying, if somebody wrongs you or hurts you, cut them off. You don't need them. Get rid of them. You're only really going to survive if you feel confident in and of yourself. You don't need relationships. And the Bible says, absolutely not. You and I, we are built for them. We crave relationships. We need them. We need people. And I'm going to do a little experiment to prove it this morning. I'm going to prove to you. I know everybody's starting to get a little nervous because I like doing interactive sermons. Here you go. And, if you're sitting by yourself, this is not going to work. This is why we're a small group. You're supposed to be sitting next to somebody right now. So cuddle up, sit next to somebody, or otherwise this experiment you'll just fall flat. Anyway, half of you aren't going to do it anyway. Okay, here, it's real simple. All I want you to do is stand up. Okay, stand up. Okay. Now sit down. Okay, sit down. Sit down. I'm not playing with you. Hold on. Bear with me. It'll bear fruit. Now, if you're sitting next to somebody, and if you're not, well, then you proved my experiment wrong. If you're sitting next to somebody, what I want you to do is lock arms with them. Just put your arm around them. One or two people. You don't have to, or you can all three, I guess. We're a small, cozy group. Some of you are like, wait, I'm not around somebody. This is awkward now. Okay, now I want you to stand up again. Okay, now, which one was sit down now. Sit down. Now, which one was easier? The second one. And one day a scientist is going to come in this room and just totally laugh at me. But what I just did to you, physiologically speaking, even though your weight increased because you locked arms with the person, physiologically speaking, you expended less energy the second time than you did the first time. Okay? That's the way the body works. It compensates, and I know some scientist is going to come in here and prove the theorem. I have it online, and I'll show it to you another time. But what I just did, I proved to you Ecclesiastes chapter 4. And Ecclesiastes 4 says this, 2 are better than one, because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. You can stop locking arms now. That's okay. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. And verse 11 is especially important this morning. And again, if two lie together, they keep warm. But who can keep warm alone? See, if you're sitting next to somebody, you're going to keep warmer than if you were by yourself right now. The point is this: we need relationships. We crave them. We have what I'm going to call this morning all an inner piglet. I'm letting that sink in. Yes, an inner piglet. Everybody's got an inner piglet. Do you remember when Piglet sidles up next to Pooh, and he says, "Pooh," he whispered. "Yes, Piglet," Pooh said. "Oh, nothing," said Piglet, taking Pooh's hand. "I just wanted to be sure of you." Gets you a little weepy, doesn't it? We all have an inner piglet inside of us that just wants to be sure of the other person. That's what we crave. The Christian faith says no man is an island. Don't try to do this alone. You will fail. You need relationships, and in relationships you'll expend the less energy than if you were by yourself. You need it, we're craving it, and it's okay. But here's the problem with relationships. Sometimes they go bad. Our relationships are inherently broken. Why? More often than not, we hurt others and others hurt us. And why? If you go back to Proverbs 24:17, it doesn't say explicitly the reason, but Proverbs 24 says, "Do not rejoice when your enemy falls." What it basically assumes, it assumes that you and I live in selfish relationships. That you and I are waiting for our enemy, waiting for the other person to fall. It assumes it. It says, do not do this. You wouldn't give a command to somebody you wouldn't say, do not shoot a person if the person doesn't have a gun. The proverb says, do not do this, because it knows that we will. The book of Proverbs says, your and my relationships are going to be broken. There's going to be hurt, and there's going to be offense. And in those times, you and I will more often than not, because we're gloating, what that word says in Proverbs, because we're rejoicing in seeing other people stumble who have wronged us. It says what you will tend to do is operate in your relationships as if they were a contract. So you make a contract with somebody, and your contract, when you sign it, says, you fulfill your end of the bargain, and I'll fulfill my end of the bargain. But the minute that you don't keep your end, bye-bye, I'll cut you off. The minute that you wrong me, the minute that you offend me, the minute that you go behind my back, the minute you do anything that I don't like, the contract is null and void. And this is what makes it easy for you and I in broken relationships to harbor resentment. See, the book of Proverbs assumes that we're going to keep resentment in our hearts. And we keep resentment in our hearts for somebody who offends us. And we do an interesting little trick. If you notice, think about somebody who's offended you recently. Somebody's hurt you. Somebody's wronged you. And what we tend to do, is keep them at a distance. We keep them at a distance because it's easier for us to harbor resentment when we can look at them almost as a caricature of themselves. It's a dehumanizing thing to do, but we do it all the time in our relationships. When somebody wrongs us, we don't draw close. We draw far away. And from a distance, we can look at our enemy, we can watch them stumble, and we can laugh, and we can gloat, and we can say, I was right. I told you so. I told you so. I told you so. See, this is a great part, and I think hopefully I put the quote into your outline, from To Kill a Mockingbird. And you know the story, little Scout Finch, the little girl narrating the story in the South, and dealing with issues of racism in the South of America in the early 20th century. And she's a little girl narrating this, and her father, Atticus Finch, everybody wants a dad like Atticus, right? Always wise. And throughout the book, she's experiencing racism, and she's trying to, it's paralleled, if you remember, Scout's issue with racism, when she sees other people who are racist towards African Americans. Her parallel is her relationship with her neighbor, Boo Radley. You remember him? And Boo Radley, she never sees him. She only knows him in a distance in the house. She's never seen him, and yet they tell all these wonderful, scary stories about Boo Radley. See, they keep him at distance. Nobody dared go into the house. Nobody dared knock on the door. They had a game when they would go to see how close to the porch they could actually get for dangerous Boo Radley, this scary monster of a man who was in the house, trapped away like a wild beast. And Scout, and Jim, her brother, and all of them would just characterize this guy sitting in the house until, do you remember at the end of the story? When they're coming home, Jim and Scout, and they're wearing their outfits, Halloween costume outfits, whatever, for their performance at school. And she can't see anything really, and she gets knocked down, and Jim gets knocked down, and there's this huge tussle and fight, and she can't see it. And then all of a sudden, when she comes to and she's at her home, she sees that Jim, her brother, has a broken arm. He's sitting in the bed. And she finds out that somebody had attacked them in the woods when they were walking home. One of her father's enemies, of course. One of the men who are racist. And she said, basically says, how did Jim get saved? What happened? And Atticus, the door opens a little bit, and you see behind the door, Boo Radley. And he's just a guy. He's not a monster. He doesn't have blood all over his mouth, which was one of the rumors that they said about him. He's a little pale, a little wispy-haired. But he comes out, and then it's this wonderful part where Scout says, can I take him home? And she, holds hands with him, and they walk home, and they go to Boo Radley's porch. And she turns around, and it's the first time, she says, that she can see life from his perspective. And she says something interesting. She said, Atticus was right. One time he said, you never really know a man until you stand in his shoes and walk around in them. Just standing on the Radley porch was enough. She looks at this whole neighborhood, and for the first time, she humanizes him instead of dehumanizes him. She knows his life because she sees his perspective. He's no longer an enemy. He's no longer a scary monster. He's a person who saved her life. And she goes on and says, neighbors bring food with death and flowers with sickness and little things in between. Boo was our neighbor. He gave us 2 soap dolls, a broken watch and chain, a pair of good luck pennies, and our lives. But neighbors give in return, and we never put into that tree what we took out of it. We had given him nothing, and it made me sad. See, Scout's the model for you and me. She characterized Boo Radley. He was at a distance. He was subhuman, and she would wait to watch him fall, like we do the people who wrong us and hurt us in our lives. But yet the day she took his hand and walked to his porch is the day that she says, he was my neighbor, and I gave him nothing, though he gave me my life. So our relationships tend to err towards brokenness. People wrong us. We wrong others. And we have a choice this morning to harbor the resentment or to let it go. And here's the Proverbs tells us how to let it go. It gives us a few very, very practical steps that I'm going to walk through right now in how you and I can start to be repairers of relationships rather than breakers. How we can hold the hand of those who have hurt us and start to see life from their shoes and their perspective. Here we go. The restoration. And here's how it happens. First, and it's going to sound a little obvious, don't keep totally silent. Okay? And there's plenty of people in this room who like to avoid all conflict. When somebody wrongs you, you say, you know what? Instead of dealing with it, I'm going to just go away. And Proverbs says here in 10:18 that the one who conceals hatred has lying lips. It says, if you truly are upset at somebody and you don't take it up to with them, then you are lying to yourself and to them. And it goes even further in 27:5, and it says, better is open rebuke than hidden love. So he says it's better for you, if you've got a problem with somebody, you're not allowed to keep totally silent. You're not allowed to avoid conflict. You must speak. But then, the next set of advice, don't pounce. In chapter 11, verse 12, it says, whoever belittles his neighbor lacks sense, but a man of understanding or wisdom remains silent. And this word for silent means, it's more, I guess you can say, cautious. It says they don't remain silent forever, but a man who has understanding knows when to speak and when not to speak. They know not to pounce on the person, to jump into attack mode. And it says, he goes on in verse 13, whoever goes about slandering reveals secrets, but he who is trustworthy in spirit keeps a thing covered. So first, don't remain completely silent. Secondly, don't pounce. Third, and this is the most important one, don't repeat. If you look at verse 24-29, it says, do not say, I will do to him as he has done to me. I will pay the man back for what he has done. And let me give you an illustration of why repeating the offense to the other person will get you nowhere. When I was a little child, I don't know, you guys are going to laugh at me. I'm letting you know my inner child here. My mom used to read me a story to kind of put me to sleep at night, and this was Briar Rabbit and Briar Fox. There was a fox and a rabbit, okay, and they grew up, I was in the South in America, they grew up in the South. And Briar Fox and Briar Rabbit were always getting into it with each other. The rabbit and the fox, the rabbit especially, was always picking on the fox, and always saying mean things to him. And in one of the stories, the fox does this. He says, I'm going to get back at that rabbit. The rabbit's wronged me. He didn't say it like that, but he says, I'm going to get back at Briar Rabbit. And so he builds this tar baby, okay? Like a snowman sort of looking thing, but made out of tar. You know tar, sticky, gooey tar, like glue almost. And he puts a hat on it, and he puts a jacket on it, and he sits it on the road. And he knows that the rabbit, who is a little hot-headed, is going to come by and going to go and talk to that tar baby. And so the Briar Fox, he hides in the bushes, and he waits. And the rabbit comes down, and the rabbit looks at the tar baby and says, good morning. And the tar baby doesn't say a thing. I mean, he's made of tar. He can't talk. And Briar Rabbit says, what's wrong with you? I said, good morning. And the tar baby just sits there because he's a tar baby. And Briar Rabbit says, what's the matter with you? You're getting me mad now. Hello, good morning. Are you deaf? And tar baby just sits there. And so there's a Briar Rabbit, he rolls up his sleeves, and he says, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to say good morning to you one more time, and if you don't say it back to me, I'm going to haul off and hit you. And tar baby doesn't say good morning. So he throws one punch into the tar. What do you think happens? He sticks. So he says, oh, you're not saying good morning to me. I'm going to punch you again. And he punches him one more time with the left arm. What happens? It sticks. Briar Rabbit's he's getting more and more mad at this tar baby. He says, what are you doing to me? What are you doing? And he kicks him with his left foot. What happens? It sticks. He says, oh, okay, I'm going to kick you one more time. You got one last chance. And he kicks him one more time. And by now, he's amassed in a big form of tarry goo. And he can't get out. And Briar Fox jumps out from the bushes and says, I got you. And Briar Rabbit is stuck. Why did I tell you that story? It helped me go to sleep for some reason. The moral of the story is this. Briar Rabbit, the more he punched, the more he got stuck. This is what Proverbs 24-29 tells you. Do not do to him as he does. Why? Because you're going to get stuck. You and I will get twisted into resentment. You and I will get further and further into that tar baby of punching the enemy and punching it. And does it ever do you any good? Does it ever make you feel that much better? Really? The Bible says if you do that, be prepared for a life of sitting in the tar, stuck, unable to move, twisted, warped. You thought you were getting your enemy back. You were just hurting yourself like Briar Rabbit did. What's the answer? And it comes in chapter 25, verse 21 of Proverbs. We read it a little while back, and I know, listen, you can look at me now. I know some of you right now are really angry with some people in your life, and what I'm about to say is going to frustrate you. Let me say it, let it sink in, and then I'll explain it. Proverbs 25:21 says, don't punch the tar baby. It says, if your enemy is hungry, do what? Give him bread to eat, and if he's thirsty, give him water to drink. And the first thing you're going to say is that it's psychologically impossible, and it is. When somebody wrongs you, nothing in you is going to make you want to give them food. Nothing in you, the way we're wired, we just said it, we're wired like the rabbit. We kick at the tar, and we kick, and we kick, and we fight, and we punch, because we think that will advance us. And you know what? The best illustration you can have is that's like giving car keys to a 5-year-old. Really? Would you trust a 5-year-old to drive your car? Why then do we think we could be trusted to drive the car of justice in our life? To drive the car of vengeance? Why do you think we have the ability to do that? We don't. 24:17 says, do not rejoice lest the Lord see it and he'll turn his anger away from you. It's another way to say, listen, God's saying this to you. I am the one who will do the vengeance, not you. And this echoes Deuteronomy 32:35. It says, when God says to his people, it is mine to avenge, I will repay. And I know, when I say that, right now, you're thinking, good. That person who wronged me, I'll just wait. God will get him. He says it. He says he's going to get him. And we wait for that thunderbolt to come down and strike that person. We wait for the mighty vengeance of God. That's not what he's saying. God's not saying, wait around for me to smite them. No, Paul takes this further in Romans 12, and he says, this is what you do to your enemies. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. And here he goes. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Side note, he doesn't say live at peace with the people you like. He says live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, and he quotes Deuteronomy, it is mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord. And then he quotes Proverbs, and Paul says, take it even further. If your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. And he ends by saying, do not overcome evil by evil, but overcome evil with good. Now, what is he doing here? Here's the choice. You have a couple minutes to make it. Whoever's wronged you in your life, 2 choices. Kick and punch, and you will go down with the tar. Or feed that person. And the only way you're going to feed that person is if you know, to the degree that you know you've been fed first. You never will want to give your enemy food, and I know you guys, and you know me, and there's a lot of hurt right now with people, and there's a lot of people that piss you off and that have offended you and angered you, and you want payment, and you want to see them fall, and you say, I need to see that, and I want that paid out. Do you not know God has paid out for you? Jesus on the cross, he didn't remain completely silent. He cried out. Jesus on the cross didn't pounce on you and me. Jesus on the cross didn't repeat the same offenses that you and I repeat all the time. When he was in conflict with us, when we hurt him, he was hurt for us. 2 Corinthians 5 says that he was the one who became sin for you. To the degree that you know that as a reality, that gospel truth is truth for you, you then can stop trying to make everyone else pay for things in your life. Because you'll know how much was paid for you. And there's a quote that I love to dust off, and I've read it many times here, and I'll dust it off again. I love this quote. Because whenever somebody wrongs me, this is what I have to read. And this is what I have to do to get back as a reminder, so that I don't make them pay, but I can pay it because I know what was paid for me. And here it is from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Costly grace, he says. Costly grace is the gospel which must be sought again and again. The gift which must be asked for. The door at which a man must knock. He's saying, listen, if you want grace, you are going to have to knock. It's there for you. Take it. He says such grace is costly because it calls us to follow. And it is grace because it calls us to follow Jesus Christ. It is costly because it costs a man his life. And it is grace because it gives a man the only true life. It is costly because it condemns sin, and grace because it justifies the sinner. Above all, it is costly because it cost God the life of his Son. Ye were bought at a price. And what has cost God much cannot be cheap for us. Above all, it is grace, because God did not reckon his Son too dear a price to pay for our life. Here's the choice, the fork in the road. And here's what wisdom in relationships will tell you. Wisdom in broken relationships is the ability for you and me to stop kicking the tar baby, to stop wanting the other person to pay, to stop waiting for them to fall. You can wait all your life, make them pay, do it, and it'll make you pay even more. But this is the chance for you and me to look at the God of all creation and say, look what he paid. He paid out his Son for me so that I don't have to go around making others pay. If this isn't the truth of your life today, make it the truth. And you have time now in silent prayer to ask God, remind me, Lord, how much you paid so that I don't ever have to make others pay. Go to him in prayer now.